You're driving down a quiet street in New York one night, the leaves down, the porch lights on, and your headlights catch something standing in the road, 4 meters tall, shaggy, with tusks curving out toward your windshield. It sounds impossible. It isn't. That animal was real, and it walked the exact ground your town is built on. And New York's prehistoric past is stranger than almost any state in America. The official state fossil isn't a dinosaur or a mammoth. It's a giant sea scorpion. There are whale bones buried in farm fields hundreds of kilometers from the ocean. And this state has produced more of one particular Ice Age giant than almost anywhere on Earth. These are the 11 prehistoric monsters that once ruled New York, and we're counting down to the one standing in your headlights. Every single one of them was real. Every single one lived right where you live now. Number 11. The giant beaver. In the Ice Age swamps of New York lived a rodent the size of a black bear, over 2 meters long, 100 kilograms, with front teeth as long as your fingers. And here is what makes New York's version of this story different. Long before any scientist put a name to Casteroides, the peoples of this region were already telling stories about a giant beaver, a monstrous one, so large it dammed whole valleys and had to be hunted down by a hero. Those stories were recorded across the Northeast and the Great Lakes, in the exact region where the bones turn up. Whether they preserve a genuine memory handed down across 10,000 years, or simply describe the enormous bones people kept finding in the bogs, no one can prove. But it is a striking thought that the monster in the legend and the monster in the peat may be the same animal. The giant beaver vanished from New York at the end of the Ice Age, around 10,000 years ago. Number 10. The stag moose. Picture a moose, and then get it wrong on purpose. Cervaltz's stood about as tall as a modern moose at the shoulder, but everything about it was off. Longer legs, a lighter build, a narrower head, and above all, antlers that looked like nothing alive today. Instead of the broad, flat paddles of a moose, it carried a complicated, forking, almost tree-like rack that spread out in several directions at once. It waded through the marshes and spruce bogs of Ice Age New York browsing water plants, and several have been dug out of the state's swamps, sometimes nearly complete, sometimes still upright where they sank. That is often how they died, stepping into a bog they could not climb back out of. The stag moose disappeared at the end of the Ice Age, around 11,000 years ago, and left no descendants at all. An entire branch of the deer family, simply gone. Number 9. The placoderm. Now go much, much further back, nearly 400 million years, to a time when New York was not only underwater, but sitting near the equator, beneath a warm tropical sea. The rocks of the Catskills and the Finger Lakes are famous for this period, and what swam there was genuinely alien. Placoderms were armored fish, and the armor was not scales. It was thick, bony plates fused into a helmet and a shoulder shield, like a knight's visor grown straight out of the skull. And they had no teeth at all. Instead, the edges of their jawbones sharpened themselves into permanent shearing blades, re-honing every time the mouth closed. Some placoderms grew enormous, and they were among the very first vertebrates on Earth to become true predators. Picture an armored, bladed fish cruising over what is now upstate New York. The placoderms ruled those seas for millions of years, then vanished completely in a mass extinction, leaving no survivors behind. Number 8. The giant ground sloth. It surprises almost everyone that ground sloths reached this far north, but they did, into the cold forests of Ice Age New York. And this was nothing like the small creature that hangs in a tropical tree. Megalonyx was the size of an ox, far too heavy to climb anything, and it walked the forest floor on the outer edges of its feet because its claws were too long to set down flat. Those claws were its entire strategy. It did not need speed because it did not need to run. It reared back on its hind legs, hooked whole branches down with a swipe, and stripped them bare. And anything that tried to attack it faced a slow, immensely powerful animal with hooks on both arms. It was not fast, not clever, and not aggressive. It simply could not be killed by anything else in that forest. Until people arrived. The ground sloths were gone from New York by around 11,000 years ago. Number 7. The whale. And this is the one that makes people stop and read the sentence twice. There are whale skeletons buried in the ground here, hundreds of kilometers from the sea. In 1849, railroad workers digging near Charlotte, just across the water from New York, unearthed the bones of a beluga whale in a farm field, more than 150 kilometers inland and over 100 meters above sea level. The explanation is extraordinary. At the end of the Ice Age, the sheer weight of the glaciers had pressed the land down so far that when the ice finally melted, the Atlantic flooded in through the St. Lawrence Valley and drowned this whole region under a cold inland sea. Belugas, seals, and whales swam over what are now farms and highways. Then the land slowly rebounded, rose back up, and the sea drained away, stranding those bones inland forever. Number 6. The sea scorpion. New York's official state fossil is not a dinosaur and not a mammoth. It is a Eurypterid, a sea scorpion, and there is a very good reason for that. The rocks of upstate New York are one of the richest sources of these animals anywhere on Earth. Eurypterids were arthropods, distant relatives of horseshoe crabs and modern scorpions, and they ruled the shallow seas of this region over 400 million years ago. Most were the size of your hand, but some were not. The largest sea scorpions ever found grew to over 2.5 meters long, the biggest arthropods that have ever existed anywhere at any point in the history of this planet. Armored, segmented, with grasping claws lined with spines and a paddle-tipped body built for swimming. Picture that, gliding over the seafloor where Syracuse now stands. And they are not rare curiosities here. Certain quarries in western New York split open to reveal whole slabs of them, dozens of animals preserved together on a single sheet of rock, as though a moment 400 million years old had been photographed and filed away. Some of the finest Eurypterid specimens in any museum on Earth came out of this state. The Eurypterids ruled for 100 million years before finally dying out. Number 5. The saber-toothed cat. Smilodon reached the northeastern forests too, and there is a detail about those famous fangs that almost nobody knows. They did not come in fully formed. A young saber-tooth grew its sabers slowly, around 6 millimeters a month, and it took roughly 3 years for them to finish erupting. Which means that for years, an adolescent Smilodon was out hunting with a set of fangs that were still growing in, still fragile, still not the weapon they would eventually become. And even fully grown, those sabers were a liability, long, flattened, and easy to snap if they struck bone. The cat's entire body, those enormous forelimbs, that low-gripping build, existed to make sure the fangs never had to take that risk. It had to hold its prey completely still before it could use its best weapon at all. Smilodon disappeared from the northeast around 10,000 years ago. Number 4. The dire wolf. Dire wolves hunted the valleys of Ice Age New York in packs, and they were heavier and stronger than the wolves that live here now. Thicker bones, a broader skull, and a bite built to crush rather than slice. But the real question about the dire wolf is not how it lived. It is why it died. Because gray wolves lived here too, at the same time, in the same forests, hunting the same country. and the gray wolf is still here. The difference seems to come down to specialization. The dire wolf was built to bring down very large prey, horses, bison, young mastodons. When those animals vanished at the end of the Ice Age, it had no fallback. The gray wolf, smaller and less committed, could switch to deer and smaller game and simply keep going. Being the more powerful animal is not the same thing as being the more adaptable one. The dire wolves were gone by around 13,000 years ago. Number 3. The short-faced bear. Arctidus was the largest meat-eating land animal in the history of North America, and it lived here. But the most provocative idea about this bear has nothing to do with what it hunted. It has to do with us. There is a long-standing hypothesis among some researchers that the short-faced bear was so large, so fast, and so aggressive toward competitors that it may have acted as a barrier to the first humans entering North America. That people struggled to establish themselves on this continent while that animal still ruled it, and only spread widely once it began to decline. It is debated and far from proven, but think about what it implies. That a single species of bear may have held up the peopling of an entire continent. Whether or not that turns out to be true, the animal itself is not in doubt. Arctidus vanished from New York around 11,000 years ago. Number 2. The American mastodon. If there is one prehistoric animal that belongs to New York, it is this one. Because this state has produced more mastodon remains than almost anywhere else in the country. Hundreds of them. Farmers draining bogs kept striking bones for 2 centuries. The most famous is the Cohoes mastodon, pulled out in 1866 from a deep pothole carved by the falls, where the animal had apparently fallen in and been unable to climb out. Another, found in Hyde Park in the year 2000, came out so complete that researchers could examine the contents of its gut and found the actual twigs, cones, and plant matter of its final meals preserved for 11,000 years. That is the strange intimacy of these finds. Not just a skeleton, but a record of what the animal ate in the last days of its life. The mastodon disappeared from New York around 10 to 11,000 years ago. And number 1. The woolly mammoth, the animal in your headlights. This is the giant everyone pictures, and it reached New York, too, grazing the cold, open country at the edge of the retreating ice. It stood up to 3.5 meters at the shoulder, wrapped in a double coat of fur over a thick layer of fat, with small ears and a short tail to hold in heat, and enormous, spiraling tusks it swung to sweep snow off the grass. It was, in every sense, a machine built for a frozen world. And when that world warmed, the machine had nowhere left to go. But the mammoth has one more twist, and it is happening right now. Of every animal on this list, the mammoth is the one scientists are actively trying to bring back. Its DNA survives in frozen carcasses in the Arctic. Companies have publicly committed to producing a living mammoth-like elephant within years, which means the animal standing in your street tonight may be the only one on this list that gets a second chance. The last mammoths died around 4,000 years ago, by far the most recent monster here. 11 monsters, a sea scorpion longer than a man, a whale buried in a farm field, an armored fish with self-sharpening jaws, and the mammoth that might yet return. And every one of them once ruled the ground, the water, or the ice of New York, right where your home stands now. They are gone, buried under the bogs and the highways. But their story doesn't have to end as bones in a peat pit. If you want to step inside their world, to live the final days of the last of its kind, that story is waiting for you right here. I'll see you in it.